Today is 29th of March 2025, and we're just 2 days to the launch of the Canada Caregiver Pilots. This is one program that has caused a lot of buzz, not just in Canada, but outside of Canada, primarily because it promises permanent residence on arrival, which is huge, especially if you live outside of Canada. If you've been following the news, we all know that it started with the immigration minister announcing this pilot, promising permanent residence on arrival. After that, we didn't hear anything for a long time. And then finally, they came and said it was launching March 31st, 2025. They gave all the requirements, and everybody started running tiki taka, trying to get a job. And then they now came and said that there are two streams, one for workers in Canada, one for those outside of Canada. Then we didn't hear anything, but now they've come back with certain specifics. So the program is launching March 31st by 10 a.m. ET. The platform is now open for both employers and those who are going to be applying, and it is closed for those who are outside of Canada at this time. They have said that they will open it at a later time for those who are outside of Canada. So on March 31st, 2025, if you do not qualify, there is no need going to put in your application. What will be the point? There is a number that they are taking for those who are in Canada and those who qualify, about 2,000 something, and I think 250 for those who are out of status in Canada. We're going to talk more about that when I show you around the platform and I show you what to do. Now, for those who qualify, if you're inside of Canada, you've gotten all the requirements, I'm sure you're excited, right? So there's a way that the platform is, which is quite different from like what we're usually used to in terms of the express entry or applying for study permit. And I'm going to show you around the platform now. And as I do that, I'll give you a few more information in terms of what you need to keep in mind, right, as you prepare for what is going to happen in the next 2 days. I've heard people say that it will close in 5 minutes. Some say 30 minutes, some say 1 hour. We don't know. But when things like this happen, it closes pretty fast. So it's like fastest fingers first. So get everything you need together so that you are not caught unawares. So let's move over to my laptop and we'll talk more as we get there. So again, this is the website. Immigrate through the Home Care Worker Immigration Pilot. I'm going to leave the link in the description. So as per the status, it is open to workers in Canada. It opens March 31st, 2025 at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, right? And I think that should be 8 a.m. Mountain Time, right? And of course, it's open to people in Canada. The fee is from $1,525. That's $1,525 to apply. So we all know, all the requirements for this program like we've known before, but we're just going to run through who can apply, right? Because some things have been added. So who can apply? To qualify, you must plan to live and work in Canada outside of Quebec. So this is for the rest of Canada apart from Quebec. So if you have a job offer from Quebec, you might not qualify for this program. You must meet the requirements of the specific stream that you have applied for. You must meet the language requirements. You must meet the education requirement. You have enough relevant work experience or training. You have a job offer as a home childcare provider or home support worker. And of course, you must be admissible to Canada, right? And like I said before, it's for those who are workers in Canada. Now, to be eligible for the workers in Canada stream, because we've heard a lot of people ask, okay, I'm in Canada as a visitor and all of that, do I qualify? It says that you must already be living in Canada, right? You can be physically outside of Canada when you apply. For example, if you're on vacation somewhere else, right, but you have been living in Canada, right, you need to show that you normally reside in Canada. You are eligible still. You must also be authorized to work in Canada full-time in any occupation, right? Even in a non-seasonal job. That means you have a valid work permit, or you have a maintained status, or you have a status that has been bestowed on you from a public policy that has been announced in Canada before. It is currently not open to those who are not working in Canada. It will open at a later date for you if you're not working in Canada. And again, what maintained status means is that you have a status in Canada that has probably expired, but you have applied to renew it, but you haven't heard back from RCC. So, for example, if you're a worker in Canada and your status is expiring in a couple of months, you have applied for an extension, right? But you haven't heard back from RCC. You have a maintained status of what you had before you submitted that application for extension. That's what maintained status means. If you are not working in Canada, when the stream does open, you must prove that you have enough money for you and your family members to settle in Canada. Now, they didn't talk about enough money before, but they are talking about it now. Now, if you're not authorized to work through one of the above options that we just mentioned, in terms of you have a valid work permit, maintained status, or the public policy, you are not eligible for this stream. For example, you are not eligible if you're working without a work permit. That's if you're a business visitor in Canada, right? Or you are a student. So if you have a study permit and you are working under the conditions of your study permit, you are not eligible for this program. And of course, we've talked a long time about the language test. You must take a language test, and you must meet a minimum of CLB4 for all the language skills. You can take the IELTS or the French exams. And of course, you must have completed the equivalent of a Canadian high school diploma or higher. And importantly, if you completed your education outside Canada, you would need to get your education credential assessed to show that it's equal to a Canadian high school diploma or higher. Now, depending on which pilot you apply to, whether it's a child care or the home support, you will need work experience or training, right, to show that you can actually do the job, right? For the home care worker pilot under the child care, it's home care child providers and early childhood educators and assistants. Those are the ones that are eligible. If you have experience as a home child care provider or as an early childhood educator. For the home support, you have experience as a home support worker, and these are also the work experience and the trainings that qualify as a caregiver or all related occupations. You are a nurse or a nurse's aide or a patient assistant associate. And more importantly, you must have 6 months of continuous full-time and relevant work experience in the past 3 years, right? Continuous full-time work experience, which means that for 6 months you worked for one employer, or if you moved employers, there was no break. So you stopped work on Monday and you continued with a new employer on Tuesday. That's the only way that will be continuous. But if there was a break, then it will not be continuous. And it must be relevant work experience in the last 3 years. Or, so you must have either that 6 months of work experience or you completed a relevant training credential in the past 2 years. That is the way that you would qualify. So again, talking about work experience, you must have at least 6 months work experience gained within or outside Canada. So this work experience, you can be a worker in Canada, but you gained that work experience outside Canada. Now, your work experience must be in one or both of the national occupation pilot of the pilot that you apply for. So for the home child care worker, it's home child care provider. That's the NOC. The NOC is 44100. And then 44100, right? Experience as a foster parent doesn't count. And of course, NOC 42202, which is an early childhood educator and assistant. The experience as an early childhood educator, a daycare teacher, or a supervisor doesn't count. It must be early childhood educator and assistant, home child care provider. That is what your work experience must be in. Then for the home support worker, your experience must be in home support worker, caregiver, or related occupations. That's the NOC 44101 or the NOC 33102, which is nurses' aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. Work experience in NOC 33102, that's the nurses' aides, orderlies, and patients that you gained in an institutional setting, maybe in a long-term home, may be eligible. So if you have that experience in a long-term home, it's eligible. In the NOCs of one pilot, either the child care or the home care, now you can have a mix of occupations only within the same pilot. For example, under the home childcare worker, your experience can include both the childcare provider and early childhood assistant. So if you're applying for the home childcare, so if you're applying under the childcare pilot, you can have work experience in both the NOCs, like it could have been a home childcare provider or early childhood educator or a mix of both of them. It doesn't matter. Same thing for the other pilots, right? Your experience can include both childcare provider and early childhood assistant. Doesn't matter. Now, when you are looking at the NOC, which we are going to look at in a bit, you must make sure that, your duties, the duties you perform in that job includes the main duties that are listed under the NOC. Please go to the NOC. I'm going to show you a snapshot of it, but go there, make sure that your main duties, which will be in probably your employment letter and reference letter from your employer, shows that you actually performed most of these duties, maybe up to 70% of the main duties that is listed under the NOC, and that you gained that work experience since you were 18 years or older, right? Don't go and bring work experience that you gained when you were 16 or 15. Maybe you are just 18, but in the last 3 years, maybe you gained that work experience, you were 16 or whatever. That doesn't count. You must have been 18. So an adult have gained that work experience within the 3 years before you apply. Any experience that you gained after you have put in your application doesn't count. You must complete your work experience before applying. So if you have like 2 weeks to make it 6 months, but by March 31st, you still have 2 weeks to make it 6 months, but you rush and apply because you feel that's roughly 6 months, it doesn't qualify, right? Your application must be refused. And like I said before, it must be continuous. If you took vacation within that time, maybe reasonable paid vacation, it's also okay. If you change jobs, there must be no breaks in between the job. And then for full time, because I've heard a lot of people asking, full time means at least 30 hours of paid work per week. Somebody has asked, is it 30, is it 40? It's not 40, 30 hours. And if you worked multiple part-time jobs at the same time, it only counts if it adds up to at least 30 hours per week for 6 months in a row, right? So if you were doing multiple part-time jobs, or you had, 2 or 3 jobs, all of those jobs together must count to at least 30 hours per week of work in the last 6 months, or in the 6 months that you are claiming in a row, right? Now, for that work experience that you are presenting, you must have been authorized to do it. You must have had temporary resident status in Canada. That if that work experience was gained in Canada, if it was gained outside of Canada, it doesn't matter. You don't need to have had a temporary resident status or any status in Canada at all. The work could have been authorized under a valid work permit, like we said before, maintained status, or a public policy. If your work experience was unauthorized, you may still be eligible for the pilot under a public policy, right? And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So what does not count as work experience? Work experience gained as a full-time student does not count. Full-time students are not even qualified for this, so that work experience does not count. If you are no longer a student, but you want to count the work experience you had as a full-time student, it doesn't count. Work experience gained while you were self-employed does not count. Any periods of unemployment does not count. Long-term sickness or parental leave does not count as well. Now, when it comes to training, you must have received a credential for a relevant training of at least 6 months within or outside Canada. The training must be targeted towards the following NOCs: the home childcare worker, which is the home childcare provider, and the early childhood educator. This does not include early childhood educators, daycare teachers, or supervisors. No, it must be early childhood educators and assistants the way it is described in the NOC. And for the home support worker, it's the home support worker, caregiver, related occupations, and the nurse's aide. So you must have gained a training in one of that for you to qualify. Now, this training we're talking about must be at the post-secondary level, which means that you've completed high school. It must be full-time, meaning at least there are 15 hours of training per week during the academic year or the period of study. It must be offered mainly in an in-person classroom environment, which means it's not an online training. You started it when you were 17 years or older, and you completed it within the 2 years before you applied. It is straightforward. There's nothing to explain here. If you completed this training outside Canada, you don't need an education credential assessment unless you are also using the training to meet the education requirements. So if you did the training, but you also have a bachelor's and you have assessed your bachelor's, you don't need to go and assess that training again. That's what it means. Now, the training that does not count is training that was targeted towards occupations other than those listed. So if you did a training in the medical field or training in something else in the medical field, it does not qualify. If your training was mainly online, it doesn't qualify. And if you did an on-the-job training, it also doesn't qualify for this. So it's either you have the work experience, as we've just talked about, or the relevant training, just as I have just described. It's one or the two. If you have the two, even better. Okay, I hope that was clear. Now, I'm just going to show you how you can search for the NOC so that you can know what you need, right? So you can know if, your work experience counts, right? So the first one is the 44100, the home childcare provider. Example titles. Now, the titles might differ, right? So your job title might not say home childcare provider. That doesn't mean you don't qualify. So babysitter, childcare living caregiver, childcare provider in a private home, a nanny, a parent helper. All of those are example titles. Now, these are the main duties. These are the things that you must be doing, right? You must perform some or all of the following duties. You must perform the majority of them. Supervise and care for children, the employer's own residents, bath, dress and feed infants and children, prepare formula, change diapers. Go and compare this to the work experience that you have. Foster parents do not qualify. And those are the duties of a foster parent that doesn't qualify. Okay. Now, let's look at another NOC. And this time we're looking at the 42202. You need to go and do this yourself. So these are the early childhood educators and assistants. These are childcare workers in the daycare, childcare worker assistant, daycare helper. These are not the people that are teaching. These are the people that are, assisting, early childhood assistant, early childhood educator, and all of that. And for you to know if you qualify, of course, you need to go and look at the job duties, right? What does early childhood educator do? What do the early childhood educator assistants do, right? This is what you need to be comparing your work experience against to be sure that you qualify or your work experience qualifies. Let's also look at the home care support workers. So that's like caregivers and related occupations. So these are family caregiver, home support worker, living caregiver, and all of that. And these are the duties. Provide care and companionship for individuals and families during periods of incapacitation, convalescence, or family disruption. All of those things, right? Even routine housekeeping duties. So if you do one of these, you don't do the rest, you might not qualify. You have to do the majority of these duties for you to actually say you qualify. And then let's look at the last one. That's the nurses aid, please, patient care, patient service associates. So this would be healthcare aid, long-term care aid, nurses aid, orderlies, patient care aid, personal care assistant or personal care attendant, resident care aid, and all of that. And these are the duties, right? You must perform the majority of these duties for your work experience to qualify. So you need to take all of the NOCs. Like if you feel that, oh, my own is in this area, take that NOC, put it in this NOC register, and then look at the duties to be sure that your work experience qualifies. It doesn't matter what your title is, right? You can have a title that is different from the work duties. So the main duties is what RCC is interested in, what you actually do at your job. Okay. So let's talk a bit about those who are out of status, and who are unauthorized home care workers. If you're a home care worker without status in Canada or authorization to work, you may still be eligible for this pilot under a public policy. I've said that quite a bit, and some people must be asking, what is a public policy? Well, this public policy exempts a small group of applicants from certain requirements of the Workers in Canada stream. This means that you could still be eligible even if you don't have legal status in Canada, you're not authorized to work, you have legal status in Canada as a visitor, and you're not authorized to work, maybe you have a visitor record, or your previous work experience in Canada was not authorized or not gained while you had temporary status. You can also include accompanying family members in Canada on your application, even if they have overstayed their temporary resident status, or they have worked or studied without authorization. That is really, really nice if you ask me. However, you must still meet all the other requirements of the pilot and the requirements of the public policy. Now, what are the requirements of the public policy? First of all, who is eligible? You've got to be in Canada when you apply. You do not have authorization to work. You don't have a temporary resident status, or you are a visitor. You must have entered Canada legally on or before December 16th, 2021. So, but if you are in Canada and you just came recently, you don't qualify. You must have been in Canada on or before December 16, 2021, and you must have lived here continuously since. So it's not like you came and then you went back. You have been here since then. You had a work permit at some point during that period, but of course by this time it has probably expired and you don't have authorization to work. You are not inadmissible to Canada for reasons other than overstaying your temporary resident status, working or study without authorization, having a family member who overstayed their own temporary resident status or worked or studied without authorization. It means that the only reason why you are inadmissible to Canada is just because you overstayed your welcome, you studied, or you worked without authorization. If you are inadmissible for any other reason apart from that, you do not qualify, or you might not be eligible. So invariably, you are not eligible if you started living in Canada after December 16, 2021. You are not eligible if you made a refugee claim. You are not eligible if you're under a removal order, right? Like a removal order has been given for you to leave Canada. You are currently in Canada on a study permit. So if you're an international student in Canada, you are not eligible. And if you haven't had a valid work permit at any point during your current period of residence in Canada, you are not eligible, right? So work permits before this period of residence don't count. So if you had work permit before this period that they are talking about, this December 16, 2021, it doesn't count. So you must have had like a work permit, valid work permit during that period. Even if you are on a visitor record now, at one point you did have that, valid work permit, right? So if you want to apply, you go to the portal, you choose either the Child Care Workers in Canada public policy or the Home Support Workers in Canada public policy. You need to provide the required forms and documents. It's listed on the document checklist, yeah? And then, of course, you need to follow the steps to complete and submit your application. All of that will be here, right? Check back for status. They are saying that they will have more information about how to restore your status and get a work permit, probably if you're able to submit your application, okay? So that is all for, those who are out of status or who are unauthorized to work in Canada. We now have like a better context in terms of those who qualify on this. If you want to apply for this program launching in a couple of days, you must have gotten a job offer. You need a genuine job offer as a home childcare provider or as a home support worker. Your employer should check for any additional requirements to hire through the home care worker immigration pilot. So your employer is also going to complete some part of the application on your behalf. So you need to be liaising with your employer because they have a very, very, very huge part to play in this. Now, you must be likely to accept the job offer and be able to perform the job duties. And of course, RCC will be reviewing things like your past training, your experience to determine that you actually can perform the job, right? The job must be in one of the NOCs in the home childcare immigration pilot, a child for childcare, or the one for the home care worker. We've already talked about all of that. The job must be in Canada, full-time and continuous, meaning at least 30 hours of paid work per week. And of course, it's permanent employment. There's no set date when the job will end. Now, when you get your job offer, you must include your hourly wage, employment requirements, a description of the main duties. Now, those main duties are what RCC will use to check against the NOC to be sure that your job offer qualifies. It must be a genuine job offer, so there's a real need for you. It's not as if someone who doesn't need a childcare, provide a childcare provider will go and employ a childcare worker just because they want to give you a job offer. That will not stand, yeah? The employer can fulfill the terms of the job, including paying you. The employer follows all the rules that is set by RCC, as well as the federal and provincial legislation. And of course, your wage must be equal to or higher than the job bank's median wage for the occupation listed on your job offer in the province or territory of employment. So, of course, it's going to differ by province and by territory. If there's no provincial or territorial median wage, of course, use the national one. If your employer is a business or a non-profit organization, they must have been providing the same type of care services as the job for at least 1 year before the job offer was made. So they can't suddenly be a business or a non-profit and you are the first person they are giving that job offer. They must, of course, have a CRA business number, and they will be either a private household or a business. That's a business or a non-profit organization that has a direct employer-employee relationship, meaning that the employer is directly responsible for hiring the employee, responsible for managing work conditions and paying the employee, right? So it's not like a third-party thing, yeah? So it's direct. Now, what doesn't count as an eligible employer? The employer can't be a recruitment or a placement agency. So it's not like a third-party thing. Someone who employs you and now posts you. Can't be an embassy or a high commission or a consulate. Can't be an employer that is found on a non-compliant list. You can click that link to find yourself. The employer also can be yourself. You can't be employing yourself, so you can't be self-employed. The employer can be your spouse, your common law partner, your parent, your grandparent, or your child. Can't be the one employing you. Your employer must complete, sign, and give you the employment information form so you can include it in your application, right? So these are the forms that you will use based on your employer. If it's an individual employer, you click that link there, IMM 0267. It's a business or a non-profit, they will use IMM 0268. They must sign the form, either digitally or by hand. You upload it as part of your online application along with your job offer. IRCC may send you a letter to give to your employer asking them to send extra proof that the job is genuine, the employer is genuine. Yeah, so if IRCC wants more information, they will ask. You will receive instruction on how your employer can send this information to IRCC. Okay. Now, of course, the next thing, if you have all of this, is for you to just go ahead and apply. So the deadline for this intake, the one that's opening March 31st, 2025, is March 30th, 2026. That's when it's going to close, right? For the childcare, it's 2,350. For the home support, 2,350. So each of them has 2,350 allowable, right? Allowable. They would accept applications when it opens March 31st until they reach the cap. Once the cap are reached, they will reset next year. So March 31st, 2026, it will reset again, right? So in case the caps are reached quickly, then you have to prepare for the next one. You must apply using the permanent resident or PR portal. They are not accepting application yet. You can only use that on March 31st at 10 a.m. ET. So if you want to apply, make sure you are on your computer March 31st at 10 a.m. ET. So you're among the first people that are applying. Get all your forms and documents ready, right? Use the document checklist. IRCC has provided the document checklist. Make sure you are downloading them. Start preparing the form. They won't accept the PDF versions. You can review them to find out what information you need. So there's lots of information here, lots of forms, all the things you need to complete, forms you sign, forms you upload. It's a lot, I know, right? But this is such a wonderful, opportunity you don't want to miss. They also have instructions for the photograph that you upload of yourself, one of each member of your family, even if they aren't coming to Canada, right? So this is an application you're filling together with your family members. Your application fee, 1,525. You can pay before the pilots open. If you don't get in, you can ask for a refund. So these are all the fees that are there. Your employer cannot charge you recruitment fees. They cannot make you pay back any recruitment fees they pay to hire you, right? They can't do that. So before you submit your application, make sure that you have answered all questions. You sign. Don't make the mistake of not signing if it applies, right? Upload all your forms. Upload the receipt of your fees that you've paid. Upload all supporting documents. Make sure the application is complete. Take your time, not because you're hurrying, you now make a mistake. It's better to take your time than to hurry and make a mistake, right? So that's all the information you have in terms of, what you're paying for and any other fees. You pay medical fee, police certificate, not to RSCC, education credential, language test. Of course, you pay all of those fees separately, okay? And of course, if you've not done biometrics before, you will pay that. You will pay the right of permanent residence fee. Those are all the things you pay, processing fee and all. So you can just check that out if you want to know what the monies you pay are. And then after you apply, of course, your application will be processed. Make sure that you keep your information up to date. You will go for your biometrics if you're between the age of 14 and 79. Yeah. Okay. Wow. They say that this is true even if you gave your biometrics in the past. I was thinking that just because you gave your biometrics before, you need to. But they are saying that you would have to give your biometrics again, book your medical test, right? And then they'll start processing your application, of course. And a lot of people want to know, how long does it take? Well, let's see. Various factors can affect how long it can take to process it. They haven't actually given the number of weeks or months it will take. But, I mean, the time it will take depends on the type of application, if the application is complete, if they have to do criminal checks on you, if any information is unclear, how easily they can verify the information you submitted, if they need to interview you, if they are communicating with you by mail rather than on your online account, how long it takes for you to respond to any requests or concerns, right? So there's no particular time, but of course they are going to be processing it. You can of course check your application status at any time, but while you are waiting for a decision, if you are in Canada, you can stay in Canada while you wait, as long as you maintain your temporary resident status. Your temporary resident status is valid for a specific period of time. So make sure that you keep it up to date while you are still waiting. So it's either they approve your application, they refuse it, or you withdraw it, right? If they approve it, you pay your right of permanent residence fee if you haven't already done so. And then, of course, you start working on how to get your permanent residence. Are you going to go to the border? And then, of course, you start preparing for your life in Canada. If they refuse you, they will send you a letter that tells you why. Right? If you want to be reconsidered, you have to submit a new application, meet the eligibility criteria, or be admissible. And if you want to withdraw your application, which I don't know why you would want to do that, you can submit a web form to withdraw or cancel it, right? You might get some of your fees refunded depending on whether they've started processing the application or not. So far we've talked about who can apply, how to get a job offer. We've talked about the eligibility criteria, those that qualify. We've talked about the knocks that qualify, the kind of training. I think we've gone through all of it. If you want to settle down and go through the information yourself, make sure that you're going to this link. I will leave the link in the description below, and you can go through it and see all you need, all the forms, download the forms, talk to your employer, get them to sign, all of just be ready so that when March 31st, 10 a.m. ET, and I think that's like 3 p.m. Nigerian time, but of course this is for those who are workers in Canada. But if you are eligible, but you are not in Canada at this time, you're outside of Canada, maybe you're in Nigeria or somewhere, you can still apply, right? My heart goes out to everyone who is applying. My heart also goes out to those who are not workers in Canada who are hoping that theirs will open soon. I pray that as soon as this one is finished, RCC will start thinking of how to also serve those who qualify but are outside of Canada at this time. Thank you so much for watching till this time. I hope you got this was valuable. The link will be in the description. Make sure you share this with a friend or anyone you know who is also planning to apply when this program opens. Remember, it's going to reset again March 31st, 2026. If you don't get in now, you can get in then. Wishing you the very best, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.